Blood drips from Jaylen Ward's split lip as Officer Kevin Barkley smirks. The courtroom freezes in shock. Nobody notices the tall figure rising from the back row, eyes locked on the officer. Former CIA operative Darius King had promised his son he'd never return to that life. Today, he breaks that promise. Before we dive into this shocking story of justice and redemption, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to support more stories exposing racial injustice in America. Can Darius King protect his son from a system rigged against him? Let's find out. Jaylen Ward, a 15-year-old black boy with partial paralysis from a childhood car accident, shifted uncomfortably on the hard wooden bench in Courtroom 305 of the Atlanta Municipal Court. His forearm crutches leaned against the table beside him, the rubber tips worn from years of use, as he navigated a world not designed for someone with his mobility challenges. Today, he faced charges of trespassing at Riverdale Mall, a crime he knew he hadn't committed. Jaylen had simply been sitting on a bench outside the food court, waiting for his mother Tamika to finish her shift at the pharmacy when security approached him. 3 white officers surrounded him, demanding identification and questioning why he was loitering. When he explained his situation, they claimed he matched the description of someone who had been harassing shoppers. Despite his protests and physical inability to flee, they detained him roughly, ignoring his medical condition and the pain they caused by forcing his partially paralyzed legs into awkward positions during the arrest. Now, Officer Kevin Barkley, a stocky white cop with thinning blonde hair and 20 years on the force, stood at the witness stand. His chest puffed out with authority as he testified about Jaylen's alleged crimes. This wasn't Barkley's first time targeting black youth. His file contained 17 complaints of racial profiling and excessive force, all dismissed or settled quietly by the department. The suspect became combative when questioned. Barkley stated with practiced confidence and attempted to flee the scene running through the mall before we apprehended him. Jaylen couldn't contain himself at this blatant lie. "Sir, that's not true," he said, his voice wavering but determined. "I can't run. I have partial paralysis. I use crutches." The courtroom fell silent as all eyes moved between the disabled teenager and the officer whose testimony was now questionable. Judge Patricia Morton, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun, frowned at the interruption but seemed troubled by the discrepancy. Officer Barkley's face flushed red, humiliated at being contradicted in public, especially by a young black defendant. What happened next shocked everyone present. In 3 quick strides, Officer Barkley crossed to the defense table and slapped Jaylen hard across the face, the sound cracking through the courtroom like a gunshot. "You calling me a liar, boy?" he growled as Jaylen's head snapped back from the force. Blood appeared on the teenager's lip as gasps and cries of outrage erupted throughout the courtroom. Tamika Ward screamed in horror, lunging toward her son, but held back by court security. Jaylen's attorney, Diana Washington, a young black woman with locks pulled back in a professional style, immediately jumped to her feet. "Your Honor, my client has just been assaulted in your courtroom by a police officer. I demand immediate action." Judge Morton appeared more concerned with restoring order than addressing the assault, banging her gavel repeatedly. "Order, I will have order in my courtroom." As phones throughout the gallery captured the incident, the chaos grew. Court security officers seemed unsure who to restrain: the officer who had committed assault, or the outraged spectators. Through it all, one figure remained perfectly still. At the back of the courtroom, Darius King stood without moving, his military training evident in his controlled posture. His dark eyes, cold with fury, never left Officer Barkley. No one in the courtroom, not even Jaylen or Tamika, knew that Darius had returned from his latest business trip early and decided to attend his son's hearing. The Ward family was well respected in their Southwest Atlanta community. Tamika worked as a hospital administrator, volunteered at their church, and advocated for disability rights. Their neighbors knew Darius as an international security consultant whose work took him overseas for weeks at a time. What they didn't know was that his frequent absences concealed a different truth, one that Officer Barkley was about to discover at the worst possible moment of his career. As the courtroom erupted around them, Jaylen looked back through tearful eyes, searching the crowd for support. For the first time, he spotted his father standing in the back, and something in Darius's expression made the boy both frightened and reassured. There was a calm, deadly focus in his father's eyes that Jaylen had never seen before. What no one in Courtroom 305 knew about Darius King was that his security consulting cover hid 23 years as a CIA operative specializing in counterterrorism and high-risk extraction operations. His real resume included covert missions across 4 continents and specialized training in 15 forms of combat. During his time with the agency, Darius had neutralized 3 major terrorist cells planning attacks on American soil and rescued 14 hostages from seemingly impossible situations. His work in Libya had dismantled a network targeting U.S. embassies, while his operations in Afghanistan had saved countless American and civilian lives by intercepting suicide bombers before they reached populated areas. In South America, he had infiltrated drug cartels, linked to terrorist financing, gathering intelligence that led to the largest cocaine bust in DEA history. His most dangerous assignment had been in Yemen, where he spent 11 months undercover. The mission ended with Darius taking 2 bullets to his shoulder while extracting a deep cover asset and 3 American aid workers. During his 6-month medical leave, he met Jaylen Ward, a compassionate hospital administrator with a bright smile and unwavering moral compass who supervised his physical therapy appointments. Their connection was immediate and profound. She never asked about the classified details of his injuries, understanding there were parts of his life he couldn't share. For the first time, Darius found himself wanting a life beyond the shadows, one with family dinners and holiday celebrations instead of safe houses and forged identities. Their relationship blossomed despite the challenges of his profession, and they married 18 months later in a small ceremony with only close friends and family. For 3 years they tried unsuccessfully to have children, enduring the heartbreak of 2 miscarriages before Tamika became pregnant with Jaylen. The pregnancy was difficult with Tamika on bed rest for the final trimester. Darius requested a temporary desk assignment to be near her, revealing to his supervisors for the first time that personal concerns might sometimes outweigh professional obligations. When Jaylen was born healthy after 36 hours of labor, Darius held his son with trembling hands, overwhelmed by a fierce protective instinct stronger than anything he'd ever experienced. He vowed that this child would grow up knowing his father, even if it meant reevaluating his commitment to the agency. For 8 years, Darius balanced his CIA responsibilities with family life, missing birthdays and school events, but always returning with exotic gifts and stories of the businesses he helped around the world. Then came the accident that changed everything. A drunk driver crossed the center line on a rainy Tuesday afternoon as Tamika drove Jaylen home from swim practice. Their car was forced off the road and down an embankment, rolling twice before hitting a tree. Tamika escaped with a concussion and broken arm, but 8-year-old Jaylen suffered a spinal injury that left him with partial paralysis in both legs. The drunk driver, a white real estate developer with political connections, received only 200 hours of community service and a suspended license. When Darius, away on a mission in Eastern Europe, received news of the accident, he immediately requested extraction. He arrived at the hospital 36 hours later to find his son in traction, facing months of rehabilitation and a lifetime of mobility challenges. Something broke in Darius that day. Not just his heart for his son's suffering, but his tolerance for a system that would allow the man responsible to walk away virtually unpunished because of his connections and privilege. That moment catalyzed Darius's decision to request a permanent transfer to CIA headquarters in Langley, accepting a senior analyst position that would keep him closer to home. For the past 7 years, he had focused on being present for Jaylen's surgeries, therapy sessions, and school events, while still serving his country by identifying patterns and threats from behind a desk rather than in the field. 3 months ago, while analyzing domestic surveillance data, Darius discovered disturbing evidence of Operation Clearwater, an unauthorized program targeting Black community leaders, civil rights attorneys, and even teenage activists in several major cities, including Atlanta. The program used resources meant for counterterrorism to monitor American citizens engaged in legal protest activities with particular focus on those speaking out against police brutality. Though technically assigned to other cases, Darius began quietly investigating connections between local police departments, district attorneys' offices, and certain federal agencies that appeared to be sharing resources for this illegal surveillance. His research led him to a corrupt network within the Atlanta Police Department, where Officer Kevin Barkley's name repeatedly appeared in connection with harassment complaints from predominantly Black neighborhoods. Barkley's unusual financial transactions also suggested payments beyond his police salary. For weeks, Darius had been gathering evidence planning to present a comprehensive case to trusted superiors at the agency. He had been following Barkley's activities, which is why he was in court today, not just as Jaylen's father, but as an intelligence operative tracking corruption. The assault on his son had just transformed a professional investigation into something deeply personal. As the courtroom chaos continued around him, Darius made a decision that would change everything. His son's blood on an officer's knuckles was the line no parent, no American, and certainly no CIA operative sworn to protect the Constitution could allow to be crossed. The system that had failed to punish his son's first attacker would not fail again, not when Darius King had the skills and resources to ensure justice would be served. In the chaos erupting through Courtroom 305, no one immediately noticed Darius's methodical approach toward the front. His movements were measured and deliberate, each step calculated as he navigated between shocked spectators and distracted security personnel. Years of operational training had taught him how to move undetected, even in plain sight, becoming visible only when he chose to be. As he reached the gate, separating the gallery from the court proceedings, a security officer finally spotted him and moved to intercept. "Sir, you need to stay back during this disruption," the officer said, hand moving instinctively toward his holster. Darius reached slowly into his jacket, maintaining direct eye contact as he withdrew a small leather wallet. When he flipped it open, the officer's eyes widened at the federal credentials displayed. "I need to speak with Judge Morton immediately regarding a matter of national security connected to this incident." Darius stated, his voice carrying authority without raising its volume. From the witness stand, Officer Barkley watched this interaction with growing apprehension. Something about the tall Black man's posture and the way court security deferred to him triggered warning bells honed by years of street instincts. Barkley's hand moved toward his service weapon, a motion Darius noted without changing his expression. Judge Morton, still attempting to restore order with her gavel, looked up as the bailiff approached and whispered in her ear. Her expression shifted from irritation to concern as she glanced at Darius. "This court will take a 30-minute recess," she announced abruptly. "Officer Barkley, you will remain in the building. Ms. Washington, please see that your client receives medical attention. Everyone else clear the courtroom." As spectators were ushered out, Tamika rushed to Jaylen's side, dabbing at his bloody lip with a tissue, while shooting venomous looks at Officer Barkley. Diana Washington placed a protective arm around her client's shoulders while using her phone to document his injury. "Mom," Jaylen whispered. "Dad's here." Tamika's head snapped up, scanning the courtroom, until she spotted Darius being escorted toward the judge's chambers. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment she recognized something dangerous in her husband's expression, a side of him she'd glimpsed only in nightmares during his overseas deployments. Within moments, Darius found himself in Judge Morton's wood-paneled chambers, facing the judge across her cluttered desk. "Your credentials indicate you're with the Central Intelligence Agency, Mr. King." She began, her tone measured but wary. What possible national security matter could be connected to a simple trespassing case? Darius closed the door before responding. Judge Morton, I'm here in two capacities. Professionally, I'm investigating a domestic surveillance operation illegally targeting Black community members in Atlanta. Personally, he paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. Jaylen Ward is my son. The judge's expression cycled through shock, disbelief, and finally cautious realization. You understand this creates an extraordinary conflict of interest, Mr. King. I understand that an officer of the court just physically assaulted a disabled minor in your courtroom, Darius countered, removing a flash drive from his pocket and placing it on her desk. This contains evidence of Officer Barkley's involvement in a pattern of racial targeting, falsified arrests, and connections to a broader corruption network involving multiple officials. I was already investigating him before today's incident. Judge Morton stared at the flash drive without touching it. This puts me in an impossible position. With respect, Your Honor, what puts you in an impossible position is that millions of people will be watching video of that assault within hours, along with your response to it. I'm offering you information that might help you make the right decision. While this conversation unfolded, Jaylen sat in an anteroom being examined by a court medic. The split in his lip required 2 small stitches, and bruising was already developing along his jawline. Tamika, barely containing her rage, confronted Assistant District Attorney Victor Reynolds in the hallway. My son was just assaulted by a police officer in front of dozens of witnesses, including the judge. I want to know right now what charges will be filed against Officer Barkley. Reynolds, a thin man with nervous eyes, shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Ward, we'll need to conduct an investigation before determining if charges are appropriate. Officer Barkley has served this community for many years. So assaulting a disabled Black child is acceptable if you've worn a badge long enough. Tamika interrupted, her voice rising. My husband is currently speaking with Judge Morton. I suggest you prepare for the storm that's coming. Outside the courthouse, bystanders who had been in the courtroom were already sharing videos of the incident on social media. Within 20 minutes, justice for Jaylen was trending nationwide, accompanied by the shocking footage of Officer Barkley striking the disabled teenager. Local news vans began arriving, reporters gathering on the courthouse steps seeking statements from anyone involved. Back in Judge Morton's chambers, the judge had reviewed enough of Darius's evidence to understand the seriousness of the situation. I'll address the assault, she said finally. Officer Barkley will be held in contempt, and I'll recommend criminal charges. But Mr. King, if you pursue this larger investigation while personally involved, you're risking your career and potentially compromising any case against these individuals. Darius leaned forward, his expression resolute. Some lines can't be crossed without consequence. Judge Morton, my son has faced discrimination his entire life, for being Black, for being disabled. Today, he was assaulted by someone sworn to protect him in a room dedicated to justice. If I don't stand for him now, what was the point of all those years protecting American ideals overseas? As tension mounts in this unfolding drama, I have to ask, would you have revealed your identity immediately if you were in Darius's position, or would you have gathered more evidence first? Comment. Number 1. If you believe Darius should have exposed the corruption network immediately, or number 2, if you think his measured approach was wiser. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're as outraged by Officer Barkley's actions as I am. Subscribe to follow Jaylen's journey toward justice. Now, what sinister forces might be working behind the scenes that even a CIA operative hasn't yet uncovered? Let's continue with Darius's shocking discoveries. Officer Kevin Barkley sat alone in an empty jury room, his police union representative having stepped out to make calls. His contempt charge meant he was temporarily detained in the courthouse rather than being allowed to leave. Using the unmonitored landline phone on the wall, he made 3 calls in rapid succession, unaware that Darius had already arranged for these lines to be tapped through unofficial channels. Reynolds, it's Barkley. We've got a situation. Some federal agent is involved. No, I don't know who he is, but he went straight to the judge's chambers. Look, this could expose everything if they start digging. Yeah, call the chief. His second call went to Police Chief Gregory Walsh. Chief, the Ward kid's case has complications. Some spook showed up with federal credentials. No, sir, I didn't get a good look at his ID. Yes, sir, I understand the importance of containment. His final call, made in a whisper, went to a burner phone. It's Barkley. The Clearwater project might be compromised. Alert the mayor and Sentinel Group. These recordings, secured by Darius through unauthorized means, revealed connections between Officer Barkley, Police Chief Walsh, District Attorney Samuel Reynolds, and Mayor Philip Anderson. Further investigation uncovered a systematic pattern. Arrests of black youth in certain neighborhoods had increased by 70% over 18 months, while arrests in predominantly white neighborhoods for identical offenses had decreased. This disparity wasn't random. Documents in Darius's possession showed the implementation of an unofficial quota system targeting minority youth for minor infractions like trespassing, disturbing the peace, and loitering. Following the digital trail, Darius discovered that Mayor Anderson had received substantial campaign contributions from Sentinel Private Corrections, a company that operated 3 detention facilities in the state. Their contracts included occupancy guarantees. If the facilities weren't at least 85% full, the county still paid the same amount. This created a perverse incentive to keep arrest and conviction rates high, particularly for minor offenses that could result in 30 to 90-day sentences. Jaylen's trespassing charge was just one of hundreds of similar cases that fed this machine. While at home that evening, Tamika accessed Jaylen's school records through the parent portal and made a disturbing discovery. "Darius, look at this," she said, pointing to disciplinary notes that hadn't been there the previous week. Somehow, Jaylen's previously clean record now showed 3 incidents of disruptive behavior and 1 of threatening language toward staff, none of which had actually occurred. Someone had retroactively created a paper trail to justify Barkley's harassment and arrest. They're trying to paint him as a problem child to justify what happened. Darius said, his expression darkening as he took screenshots of the falsified records. That night, as Jaylen slept fitfully, still shaken from the day's events, Darius noticed a sedan with tinted windows parked across the street. Using specialized equipment from his home office safe, he detected electronic signals indicating their home was under surveillance, their phones tapped, and possibly even cameras or listening devices planted. Without alerting Tamika to the full extent of the danger, he suggested they stay with her sister in Decatur until things settle down. Once they were safely relocated, Darius activated his network. 3 former CIA colleagues still owed him favors from operations in Beirut and Caracas. Within hours, they had established a secure communication channel and begun gathering additional intelligence on the corruption network. Their first discovery was Financial Chief Walsh D.A. Reynolds and 4 senior police officers, including Barkley, had received payments through a series of shell companies linked to Sentinel Private Corrections. The second revelation came when Officer Layla Johnson, a young black police officer who had been documenting departmental abuses, reached out through a secure drop site Darius had established. "I've been tracking racial discrepancies in arrests for months." Her message read, accompanied by internal police memos directing increased patrols and enforcement in specific neighborhoods, all predominantly black or Latino. Officers who don't meet their unofficial quotas get assigned to overnight shifts or dangerous areas without backup. Those who exceed quotas get bonuses labeled as performance incentives. The conspiracy extended beyond just policing and private prisons. Mayor Anderson had appointed his former campaign manager as head of the Atlanta Housing Authority, where they systematically denied housing assistance to families with any member having a criminal record, even minor offenses or arrests without convictions. This created a permanent underclass of families struggling with both housing instability and legal issues, unable to escape the cycle. Most disturbing of all were the threats that began arriving at Tamika's sister's house, slipped under the door, or left on windshields. "Drop the complaints or your family won't be safe," read one note. Another contained photos of Jaylen at physical therapy taken without their knowledge. Darius recognized these tactics. They weren't just meant to frighten, but to isolate. By making the family feel that nowhere was safe, the conspirators hoped to force them into silence or drive them from the city. That evening, Darius received a call from his CIA supervisor, Deputy Director Alan Blackwood. "King, what the hell are you doing down there in Atlanta?" Blackwood demanded without preamble. "Sir, I'm on approved leave visiting family," Darius responded carefully. "Cut the bullshit, King. I've got the Atlanta police chief calling federal contacts claiming a rogue CIA officer is interfering in local law enforcement. Then I find out the rogue officer is you, and the case involves your son. You know this violates every protocol. With respect, sir, this goes beyond a local incident. I've uncovered evidence of systemic civil rights violations connected to the Clearwater surveillance program I flagged 3 months ago. Evidence you gathered while personally involved and without authorization," Blackwood countered. "Listen to me carefully, back off now or you'll face internal review. Best case, you lose your pension. Worst case, prosecution for misuse of federal resources and revealing classified methods. 23 years of service gone, and for what?" After hanging up, Darius stared at the wall, weighing his options. The call confirmed his suspicions that the corruption had federal connections. Blackwood shouldn't have known about the Atlanta situation, unless someone with serious influence had reached out. Later that week, District Attorney Reynolds announced his office would not pursue charges against Officer Barkley, citing insufficient evidence despite the video, and claiming Jaylen had made movements that could be construed as threatening. The decision sparked protests outside the courthouse and police headquarters, with hundreds carrying signs reading "Justice for Jaylen" and "Black Disabled Lives Matter." Through secure channels, Darius learned that his CIA communications had been compromised. Someone with high-level federal access was monitoring his calls and emails, meaning the corruption extended far beyond Atlanta. That night, as Tamika and Jaylen slept in the safe house, Darius sat with his 3 CIA colleagues planning their next move. "We're facing a coordinated effort with connections to federal agencies, local government police, and private corporations," he explained. "They're watching us, they have resources, and they're not afraid to threaten a disabled teenager." "So we walk away," suggested Michael Torres, a former undercover specialist. "Protect your family, live to fight another day." Darius shook his head. "If we retreat, they win. And not just against us. Against every black family in Atlanta targeted by this system. Every disabled kid profiled because they looked different. Every community denied resources because their residents have records for crimes they were pressured to plead to." "Then we need to be smarter than they are," said Rebecca Chen, an intelligence analyst who had worked with Darius in Yemen. "We need to expose everything at once so completely that no one can cover it up." As dawn broke, they had the outline of a plan. Dangerous, possibly career-ending, but necessary. What they didn't realize was that the next move wouldn't come from them, but from Jaylen himself. The morning news showed Police Chief Gregory Walsh standing at a podium flanked by uniformed officers, including several black and Latino officers strategically positioned for the cameras. "The Atlanta Police Department stands by Officer Kevin Barkley, a decorated officer with 20 years of dedicated service to this community." Walsh stated, his expression appropriately grave yet supportive. "While we acknowledge that emotions ran high in the courtroom that day, we ask the public to remember that our officers face tremendous stress when dealing with uncooperative suspects. We are conducting a thorough internal review of the incident." The press conference had been carefully orchestrated, from the diverse officers standing behind the chief to the selective leaking of Barkley's commendations to friendly reporters. No mention was made of the 17 complaints in his file or the pending lawsuit from another black family alleging excessive force during a traffic stop last year. By afternoon, Mayor Philip Anderson joined the coordinated defense, holding his own media event at City Hall. "I've spoken with Chief Walsh about this unfortunate incident," the mayor said with practiced concern. While the video circulating online is troubling when viewed without context, we must consider that young Mr. Ward has a documented history of behavioral issues at school and previous encounters with law enforcement. Our officers deserve the benefit of the doubt while we investigate fully. Darius and Tamika watched in stunned silence as the mayor referenced the falsified school records they had discovered just days earlier. The fabricated narrative was being deployed with frightening efficiency. Local news outlets, particularly those owned by Sentinel Media Group, a subsidiary of the same parent company as Sentinel Private Corrections, began running stories questioning Jaylen's character. One segment featured an anonymous teacher, claiming Jaylen was often confrontational, something his actual teachers would never say about the quiet, studious boy. Another report mentioned a juvenile record that was entirely fabricated, as Jaylen had never been in trouble before the mall incident. The character assassination extended to the entire family. Rumors circulated that Darius had been dishonorably discharged from military service. He had never served in the military, only the CIA, and had anger management issues. Tamika's professional reputation came under attack when board members at her hospital received anonymous emails questioning her competence and suggesting she had mismanaged department funds. The pressure intensified when Jaylen returned to school. Classmates whose parents had absorbed the media narrative began avoiding him. Some repeated cruel comments they'd heard at home, asking if he was going to play the race card, or if he'd attacked the cop first. Even some teachers seemed to view him differently, watching him with new wariness, as though he might become disruptive at any moment. During lunch period, a white student deliberately knocked one of Jaylen's crutches away, causing him to stumble. "Oops, didn't see you there, troublemaker," the boy sneered. Rather than retaliate, Jaylen quietly picked up his crutch and moved to another table, knowing that any reaction would be used against him. That evening, Darius received another call from Deputy Director Blackwood. "This is your final warning, King," his supervisor said without preamble. "The director himself has been contacted about your activities. Unauthorized surveillance of police communications, misuse of agency resources, potential exposure of methods and sources. Return to Langley immediately for reassignment or face termination proceedings." Sir, with respect, American citizens are having their rights systematically violated. A corruption network extends from local police to federal levels. Isn't that precisely what we're supposed to prevent? Your objectivity is compromised by personal involvement. Blackwood replied, his tone softening slightly. "I understand your son was mistreated. File complaints through proper channels. Let the system work." "The system is the problem," Darius countered. "And someone with high-level federal access is helping Atlanta officials cover this up. That should concern the agency far more than my investigation methods." After hanging up, Darius knew his CIA career was likely over. Whatever happened next, he had crossed a line from which there was no return to his former life. Meanwhile, Diana Washington, Jaylen's attorney, faced her own professional threats. The district attorney's office suddenly began reviewing her previous cases, looking for procedural errors. The State Bar Association received an anonymous ethics complaint. Her office lease was abruptly terminated for building renovations, with 48 hours' notice. When she appeared on a local news program to discuss Jaylen's case, the station experienced technical difficulties during her segment. Most concerning of all, Judge Patricia Morton, who had initially seemed willing to address Officer Barkley's misconduct, suddenly recused herself from all matters related to the case, citing personal conflicts without elaboration. Her replacement judge, William Harrington, had received substantial campaign donations from Sentinel Group executives and had a history of ruling in favor of police in misconduct cases. That night, as the family gathered in their temporary safe house, they faced a difficult conversation. "They're too powerful," Tamika said, exhaustion evident in her voice. "The mayor, the police, the media, they're all working together to paint Jaylen as a criminal and us as troublemakers. Maybe we should consider moving, starting over somewhere else. Running won't solve anything, Darius replied, though the weight of the situation showed in the new lines on his face. This system doesn't just hurt our family. It's destroying hundreds of black families across this city. If we leave, they win and nothing changes. But is it worth risking everything? Tamika pressed. Your career is already in jeopardy. My job might be next. And Jaylen is suffering every day he goes to that school now. The room fell silent as they considered their limited options. Then Jaylen, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. I don't want to run, he said firmly. What happened to me in that courtroom happens to black kids every day, except there's no video and no one believes them. Most don't have a dad who can fight back like you can. If we leave, what about them? His parents looked at their 15-year-old son with a mixture of pride and concern, seeing a maturity forced upon him by circumstances no child should face. Running teaches me that when things get hard, we just give up and go away. Jaylen continued. That's not what you've ever taught me, Mom. And Dad, you always say that standing up for what's right matters more than standing up for yourself. I want to stand up for what's right, even if it's hard. Darius and Tamika exchanged a glance, a silent communication born of years together facing challenges. They recognized the truth in their son's words, even as they feared the difficult path ahead. All right, Darius said finally. We don't run, but that means we need to be smarter and more strategic than they are. This isn't just about clearing your name anymore, Jaylen. We're taking on a system designed to protect itself at all costs. Outside their safe house, unseen in the darkness, a surveillance team photographed everyone entering and leaving. Inside a parked van, a man with federal credentials monitored their communications. The counterattack against the King Ward family was comprehensive and coordinated. What the corrupt officials didn't yet realize was that their very success in marshaling forces against one family would ultimately become their greatest vulnerability. The community rally at Ebenezer Baptist Church marked the beginning of the turning point. What city officials expected to be a small gathering of family supporters swelled into a crowd of over 2,000 people spilling out of the historic church where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once preached and into the surrounding streets. Families of other black youth who had faced similar targeting came forward with their stories. Civil rights veterans stood alongside teenagers with disability rights groups, creating a coalition that crossed generational and demographic lines. Jaylen, nervous but determined, addressed the crowd briefly. I just wanted to wait for my mom that day at the mall, he said, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but Officer Barkley didn't see a kid waiting for his mom. He saw a black boy who didn't belong. Then in court, when I spoke the truth, he thought he could silence me with violence. But he was wrong. We won't be silenced. The crowd erupted in supportive cheers and applause, many holding signs with Jaylen's image and the hashtag #WeWantBeSilenced. Local news stations covered the event, though Sentinel-owned media either ignored it or characterized it as a small group of agitators. However, national media had begun picking up the story, making it harder to control the narrative. The cell phone videos of Officer Barkley striking Jaylen had been viewed over 12 million times across various platforms. As public pressure mounted, cracks began appearing in the conspiracy. Officer Layla Johnson wasn't the only police officer troubled by departmental practices. 5 other officers, including 3 white veterans with impeccable records, approached Darius through secure channels to share evidence of the quota system targeting black neighborhoods. One provided body cam footage showing a precinct commander explicitly instructing officers to find reasons to stop young black males between 15 and 25 in certain areas. That same week, a clerk from the mayor's office anonymously delivered documents showing Mayor Anderson had met privately with Sentinel Group executives 27 times in the past year, with no public record of these meetings in his official calendar. Most critically, Officer Johnson risked her career to secure internal communications, proving Mayor Anderson had personally directed the police department to increase arrests in 3 predominantly black neighborhoods, where he faced political opposition. The documents showed a direct connection between campaign donations from Sentinel Group and policy decisions affecting arrest rates and jail populations. While this evidence was being gathered, Darius reconnected with former CIA colleagues who had served with him overseas. Michael Torres, Rebecca Chen, and James Wallace formed a skilled team that brought specialized capabilities. Torres, an expert in surveillance countermeasures, secured their communications and swept for listening devices. Chen, with her background in financial intelligence, tracked the money flowing between Sentinel Group Police Department foundations and offshore accounts linked to city officials. Wallace, who had worked in the CIA's Digital Operations Division, helped them bypass security systems to access secured records. Their collective skills honed in operations protecting American interests abroad were now deployed to protect American citizens from domestic corruption. As evidence mounted, national civil rights organizations became involved, bringing additional legal resources and media attention. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund assigned 3 attorneys to work with Diana Washington on Jaylen's case. The Disability Rights Legal Center filed an amicus brief detailing how disabled Black youth faced compounded discrimination in the criminal justice system. Prominent civil rights attorneys from across the country offered support recognizing the potential precedent-setting nature of the case. Meanwhile, Tamika leveraged her hospital connections to obtain medical records of 17 other Black individuals who had been treated for injuries sustained during arrests or in police custody over the past year. The records showed a disturbing pattern of injuries inconsistent with official police reports, suggesting widespread falsification of use-of-force documentation. With strategic guidance from Darius, key pieces of evidence were leaked to trusted national journalists, with instructions to hold the information until a specific date. This coordination would ensure maximum impact when everything was revealed simultaneously, preventing officials from controlling the narrative through their local media connections. In an unexpected development, Judge Patricia Morton, who had recused herself from Jaylen's case, privately reached out to Diana Washington. "I was pressured to step down from the case," she admitted during a clandestine meeting in a park outside the city. "2 men claiming to be federal agents visited my home. They knew details about my grandchildren's schools and my sister's medical conditions. The threat was implicit, but clear." Judge Morton provided a sworn affidavit documenting the intimidation, though she was too frightened to go public immediately. As pressure mounted on multiple fronts, Officer Barkley began to realize he might become the scapegoat for the entire operation. During a tense meeting with Police Chief Walsh and representatives from the District Attorney's Office, he was told to take full responsibility for the courtroom incident and characterize it as an isolated lapse in judgment due to stress. "We'll make sure you're taken care of," Chief Walsh assured him, though his eyes didn't meet Barkley's. 6 months paid leave, then early retirement with full pension. The heat will die down. Barkley, no fool, despite his brutish tendencies, recognized he was being set up to take the fall. That evening, he contacted his police union representative to discuss the possibility of immunity in exchange for testimony about departmental practices and mayoral directives. As these various threads came together, the King Ward family gathered with their growing team of allies to finalize their strategy. "We have enough evidence to expose individual pieces of this conspiracy," Darius explained, "but we need to reveal everything simultaneously to prevent them from containing the damage. That means coordinating legal filings, media releases, and public testimony on the same day." "We'll need protection," Tamika noted. "Once we do this, the threats will escalate before they subside." "I've arranged security," Darius assured her. "And we'll have too much public attention for them to act overtly against us." Jaylen, who had been quietly listening, raised the question that had been bothering him. What if it's not enough? What if they still get away with it? The room fell silent as everyone considered this possibility. The system they were challenging had protected itself for decades. "Then we keep fighting," Diana Washington said firmly. "But I don't think that will happen. Not this time. The evidence is too strong, the witnesses too credible, and the public already engaged because of you, Jaylen. Sometimes it takes one case, one moment to change everything. I believe this is that moment. As they finalized their plan, dubbed Operation Daylight, each person present understood the risks and potential consequences. Careers might end, reputations might suffer, and their safety could be temporarily compromised. Yet the alternative, allowing a corrupt system to continue targeting black families like Jaylen's, was unacceptable. The turning point had arrived not just for one family seeking justice, but potentially for an entire city caught in the grip of systemic racism and corruption. I have to pause here and ask, would you have the courage to stand up against such powerful forces if you were in Jaylen's position? Comment number 1. If you believe speaking truth to power is always worth the risk. Or number 2, if you think protecting your family should come first. Don't forget to like this video if you're inspired by the Ward King family's determination to fight for justice. Subscribe to see how their dangerous plan unfolds in the next part. Can a disabled black teenager and his family really bring down a conspiracy that extends from City Hall to federal agencies? Let's find out what happens when Operation Daylight begins. Operation Daylight began at precisely 6 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, chosen because the police department had its weekly command staff meeting. The mayor had a breakfast fundraiser and the district attorney would be in court for a high-profile murder case. The timing ensured that all key conspirators would be occupied and unable to coordinate their responses when the evidence against them became public. Darius's team had established a command center in a vacant office space rented under a shell company name. Screens displayed police radio frequencies, social media monitoring news channels, and surveillance feeds from key locations around the city. Rebecca Chen managed communications while Michael Torres coordinated with their contacts in the field. James Wallace monitored digital systems prepared to counter any attempt to scrub incriminating records from government servers. The plan required precise execution across multiple fronts simultaneously. At the center of it all was Jaylen, who had made the courageous decision to act as bait in a carefully orchestrated sting operation. Despite his parents' initial reluctance, they recognized that Officer Barkley's fixation on their son created an opportunity to expose the entire corrupt system. Remember, Darius instructed his son as they prepared that morning, your only job is to be visible at the community center event. You don't approach Barkley, you don't provoke him. If he takes the bait, let him come to you while the cameras are rolling. Jaylen nodded, his expression serious beyond his 15 years. I understand, Dad. I'm ready. The community center in Southwest Atlanta was hosting a youth leadership conference focusing on civic engagement and voting rights. Given Officer Barkley's assignment to that precinct and his documented pattern of targeting young black activists, the team calculated an 87% probability he would respond to Jaylen's presence at the event. They weren't disappointed. Tamika had coordinated with community activists to ensure witnesses would be present throughout the center, many wearing small camera devices disguised as ordinary accessories. Diana Washington had arranged for 3 news crews to cover the youth conference, ostensibly focusing on positive community engagement, but strategically positioned to capture any confrontation. Across the city, other elements of Operation Daylight unfolded simultaneously. Officer Layla Johnson used her access to plant recording devices in the police precinct's briefing room, where quota discussions regularly occurred. Judge Morton, having overcome her fear, was meeting with federal prosecutors from outside the Atlanta jurisdiction, providing sworn testimony about the intimidation she had experienced. At City Hall, a whistleblower from the mayor's office was downloading financial records showing improper payments and contract manipulations. All of these operations occurred under the electronic protection of Wallace's countermeasures, which created digital blind spots in surveillance systems that might have detected them. The most dangerous aspect of the plan involved Darius himself. Using skills honed through decades of covert operations, he had secured an invitation to a private breakfast meeting between Police Chief Walsh Mayor Anderson and executives from Sentinel Group at an exclusive downtown club. Wearing the disguise of a Sentinel security consultant, complete with false credentials, Darius sat at a nearby table, his custom recording equipment capturing every incriminating word as they discussed containment strategies for the Ward situation and the need to make an example of anyone who challenged the system. Just before noon, Operation Daylight achieved its first major success. Officer Barkley, patrolling near the community center, spotted Jaylen through the glass doors as the teenager participated in a panel discussion on youth civic rights. Something in Barkley snapped at the sight of the boy speaking confidently to an audience of attentive adults. The officer, who had faced no consequences for assaulting a disabled teenager in court, couldn't tolerate seeing that same teenager being treated with respect and admiration. Barkley entered the community center, his hand resting on his weapon as he moved toward the conference room. Security cameras captured his aggressive stance and facial expressions as he pushed through the door, interrupting the panel. "Well, if it isn't the troublemaker playing community leader," he announced loudly, causing heads to turn throughout the room. "Funny how you find time for this instead of answering for your crimes." Jaylen, prepared for this moment, remained calm. "Officer Barkley, I'm participating in a youth leadership conference. I have every right to be here." "You have the right to remain silent," Barkley sneered, moving closer. "Maybe you didn't learn that lesson in court." As planned, conference organizers and adult mentors immediately positioned themselves between Barkley and Jaylen. "Officer, this is a registered community event with proper permits," said Reverend James Thomas, pastor of a local church. "This young man is an invited speaker. What crime are you suggesting he's committed?" Barkley's face flushed with anger at the challenge. "Interfering with police business. Disturbing the peace. I could come up with more if needed." His hand moved to his handcuffs. "Step aside unless you want to join him." News cameras captured every moment as Barkley attempted to reach Jaylen, clearly intending to detain him without cause. The adults formed a protective circle around the teenager's cell phones, recording as the officer grew increasingly agitated. "This is exactly the type of police harassment we've been documenting," announced civil rights attorney Marcus Bell, who had been planted in the audience. "Officer Barkley is demonstrating the targeted enforcement patterns affecting Black youth in this community." Realizing too late that he had walked into a carefully set trap, Barkley reached for his radio to call for backup. Before he could complete the call, two internal affairs officers entered the room, having been anonymously tipped about a potential incident. "Officer Barkley," said Lieutenant Sofia Rodriguez, "I need you to step outside with us immediately." As Barkley was escorted from the building, his face contorted with rage. Jaylen exhaled slowly. The first phase had succeeded perfectly. Across town, Darius's recording equipment captured Mayor Anderson speaking candidly about the necessity of keeping certain neighborhoods in check through aggressive policing. Chief Walsh mentioned the arrangement with Judge Harrington, ensuring favorable rulings in police misconduct cases. A Sentinel Group executive referred explicitly to their investment in ensuring steady occupancy rates at their facilities through supportive enforcement policies. Each statement alone was damning. Together they outlined the entire corrupt system in the conspirators' own words. At police headquarters, Officer Johnson's planted devices recorded a precinct commander instructing officers to find at least 3 loitering violations in the Peachtree corridor today, and to focus on the young males who look like trouble. A thinly veiled instruction for racial profiling. When an officer questioned whether this was legal, the commander responded, "It's what the chief wants and what keeps our overtime funded. Don't ask questions if you want to keep advancing." By mid-afternoon, evidence was flowing into the command center from all sources. Wallace had successfully downloaded thousands of emails between city officials and Sentinel Group executives, including explicit discussions of targeting specific neighborhoods for increased arrests. Financial records showed payments to several judges' campaign funds coinciding with favorable rulings in cases involving Sentinel's interests. Medical records compiled by Tamika revealed 43 cases of injuries to Black arrestees that had never been properly investigated. The operation's most dangerous moment came when Darius, leaving the private club after the breakfast meeting, was recognized by one of Chief Walsh's security detail. "Hey, you're not Tim Reynolds from Sentinel," the officer said, reaching for his weapon. "ID now." Darius, prepared for this contingency, triggered a medical emergency distraction in the lobby. A team member posing as a businessman suddenly collapsed with apparent cardiac symptoms. In the ensuing commotion, Darius slipped away through a service entrance, the crucial recordings secure. By 6 o'clock that evening, all teams had successfully extracted with their evidence, converging on the command center to compile everything for simultaneous release. Lawyers prepared emergency filings in state and federal court. Media contacts received carefully organized evidence packages with embargo instructions. Social media specialists prepared coordinated campaigns to ensure the revelations couldn't be buried or spin-doctored. The final phase of Operation Daylight was about to begin transforming individual pieces of evidence into an irrefutable exposé of systemic corruption. As Jaylen rejoined his parents at the command center, his expression reflected both exhaustion and determination. "You did brilliantly," Tamika told him, embracing her son tightly. "I've never been more proud." "It's not over yet," Darius cautioned, though his eyes showed similar pride. "The evidence is gathered, but now comes the most important part, making sure it's used to create real change." As the team prepared for the final phase, they knew the next 24 hours would determine whether their dangerous gambit would succeed in dismantling a deeply entrenched system of corruption and racial targeting, or whether the powerful forces they challenged would find ways to preserve their position. For Jaylen, the teenager whose courage had catalyzed this entire operation tomorrow would either bring vindication or greater danger. Either way, there would be no returning to the life they had known before. Officer Barkley's hand struck his face in that courtroom. The coordinated release of evidence began at exactly 8 o'clock Wednesday morning, timed to coincide with morning news programs, the opening of federal offices, and the start of the judicial day. Within minutes, the carefully orchestrated plan transformed Atlanta's political landscape. On every major network, footage played of Officer Barkley's courtroom assault on Jaylen, immediately followed by his attempted intimidation at the community center. These images were juxtaposed with the recorded statements of Mayor Anderson and Police Chief Walsh discussing their arrangement to target black neighborhoods. CNN's Atlanta affiliate broke the story of Judge Morton's intimidation by federal agents, complete with her sworn affidavit describing threats against her family. MSNBC featured an exclusive interview with Officer Layla Johnson, her face partially obscured, but her badge number visible, detailing the quota system and retaliation against officers who questioned racially targeted enforcement. On social media, #CorruptATL and #Justice. For Jaylen trended nationally, with millions sharing the evidence packages strategically released by Darius's team. The financial connections between Sentinel Group city officials and judges spread across platforms faster than anyone could contain them. At the federal courthouse, Diana Washington filed an emergency civil rights lawsuit, naming 27 defendants, including Officer Barkley, Chief Walsh, Mayor Anderson, and several federal officials implicated in the illegal surveillance of black community leaders. The comprehensive filing included over 400 pages of evidence gathered during Operation Daylight. Simultaneously, trusted FBI agents from the Civil Rights Division, contacted directly by Darius through former intelligence community connections, arrived at Atlanta Police Headquarters with federal warrants. Unlike local FBI officials, who had connections to the corrupt network, these agents came from Washington, D.C., and Birmingham field offices selected for their records of integrity in civil rights investigations. At 9:30, Officer Barkley attempted to flee the city. Airport security cameras captured his arrival at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, where he purchased a ticket to Cancun using cash. Federal agents intercepted him at the gate, placing him in handcuffs as other travelers recorded the arrest on their phones. By 10 o'clock, federal agents had secured the offices of Mayor Anderson Police Chief Walsh and the headquarters of Sentinel Group's regional operations. Computers were confiscated, files sealed, and employees instructed not to delete any records under penalty of obstruction charges. The mayor, attempting to hold an emergency press conference to deny the allegations, found himself interrupted by federal marshals serving a warrant for his devices and documents. His stunned expression as agents boxed his files became another viral image in the unfolding scandal. Police Chief Walsh barricaded himself in his office for 2 hours, reportedly shredding documents before surrendering to federal authorities. His deputy chiefs, recognizing the inevitable collapse of the corrupt leadership, began cooperating immediately, providing additional evidence in hopes of leniency. Judge Harrington, implicated in numerous corrupt rulings, announced an emergency medical leave and attempted to flee to his lake house in northern Georgia. State police, acting on federal information, intercepted his vehicle on Highway 400. At noon, the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia, an appointee untouched by the local corruption, announced the formation of a special task force to investigate civil rights violations and corruption in Atlanta's criminal justice system. The evidence presented to our office suggests a systematic effort to target Black citizens, particularly youth, for enforcement actions designed to benefit private interests and political power. She stated, "This represents a profound betrayal of public trust and potentially numerous federal crimes." By mid-afternoon, 7 additional police officers had come forward with testimony about the quota system and racial targeting practices. 3 judges recused themselves from all pending criminal cases, citing potential conflicts of interest, in a transparent attempt to distance themselves from the growing scandal. The District Attorney Samuel Reynolds, faced with evidence of his office's role in dismissing legitimate complaints against officers like Barkley, announced his immediate resignation for health reasons. On social media, Jaylen Ward became a national symbol for both racial justice and disability rights. Videos of his composed responses during the community center confrontation with Barkley contrasted sharply with the officer's uncontrolled rage. Civil rights leaders praised the teenager's courage, while disability advocates highlighted how his physical vulnerability had been exploited by those meant to protect him. President Marcus Johnson issued a statement calling the situation deeply troubling and directing the Justice Department to investigate thoroughly any federal involvement in civil rights violations. This presidential attention ensured the investigation couldn't be quietly contained or dismissed. Tamika Ward, appearing on a national news program with Diana Washington, spoke powerfully about the dual discrimination her son faced as both Black and disabled. "The system didn't just fail Jaylen," she said. "It was deliberately designed to harm him and thousands of young people like him. The only difference is that my son had evidence and support that most families never get." Her composed dignity in the face of such injustice resonated with millions of viewers. The Sentinel Group, facing multiple federal investigations and a catastrophic public relations crisis, attempted damage control by announcing the resignation of 3 executives and the termination of their contracts with Atlanta's detention facilities. Their stock plummeted 42% in a single day as investors fled the toxic association. Federal investigators discovered that similar arrangements existed in at least 7 other cities, triggering nationwide scrutiny of private prison contracts. For Darius King, the operation's success came with personal consequences. His unauthorized use of CIA resources and connections triggered an internal agency review. Deputy Director Blackwood summoned him to Langley for an emergency hearing before the Office of Inspector General. "You disobeyed direct orders," Blackwood stated as Darius sat across from him and 3 senior officials. "You used agency methods for personal purposes. You exposed operations techniques. You involved former officers in unauthorized activities. Give me one reason why you shouldn't be terminated immediately and possibly prosecuted." Darius remained calm. "Because everything I uncovered reveals a domestic threat to constitutional rights that falls squarely within our mandate to protect American democratic institutions. The corrupt network I exposed wasn't just targeting my son. It was systematically undermining equal protection under law, using techniques developed for counterterrorism against American citizens based on their race. The hearing continued for 6 hours, with testimony provided remotely by federal officials who had reviewed the evidence. By the end, even Blackwood seemed troubled by the scope of the corruption Darius had uncovered. "You'll remain suspended pending final determination," he concluded. But off the record, King, what you found needed to be found. The methods are the problem, not the outcome. As evening fell on the most consequential day in Atlanta's recent history, the King Ward family gathered at their safe house, watching the continuing coverage of arrests, resignations, and revelations. "What happens now?" Jaylen asked, his voice betraying his exhaustion. Darius placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Now comes the harder part. Exposing corruption is just the beginning. Building something better in its place, that's the real challenge." "But we've changed things, right?" Jaylen persisted. "This won't just disappear or get covered up." Tamika smiled at her son, her eyes reflecting both pride and caution. "Not this time, baby. Too many people are watching now. Too many brave people have spoken up. Change doesn't happen overnight, but sometimes it needs a catalyst. You became that catalyst." As news helicopters circled City Hall and federal agents continued securing evidence across Atlanta, the family knew their lives had been permanently altered. Justice was beginning to unfold, but the full consequences, both for the corrupt system and for those who had exposed it, remained to be seen. 6 months after Operation Daylight exposed Atlanta's web of corruption, the transformed landscape reflected both justice served and the ongoing struggle for systemic change. The federal courthouse, packed with media and spectators, fell silent as Judge Elaine Carpenter delivered her verdict in United States v. Kevin Barkley. "This court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison for multiple civil rights violations, conspiracy against rights, and obstruction of justice," she stated, looking directly at the former officer who had once seemed untouchable. "Your actions not only harmed a disabled child, but betrayed the sacred trust placed in law enforcement officers." Barkley, no longer in uniform, but handcuffed in an orange jumpsuit, showed no remorse as he was led away. His trial had revealed even more extensive misconduct than initially documented, including 7 previously unreported incidents of excessive force against black teenagers. The police chief and mayor hadn't fared much better. Both had accepted plea deals to avoid longer sentences, providing extensive evidence against higher-level conspirators in federal agencies and private corporations. Chief Gregory Walsh received 8 years for conspiracy, civil rights violations, and corruption. Former Mayor Philip Anderson was sentenced to 12 years for racketeering, bribery, and conspiracy against rights. Their cooperation had triggered investigations in 6 other cities, with similar arrangements between police departments, local governments, and private detention companies. More significantly, their testimony exposed the federal officials who had protected the corrupt system. 3 FBI agents and a senior Justice Department official faced charges for their role in Operation Clearwater, the illegal surveillance program targeting black community leaders that Darius had initially discovered. For Jaylen, now 16, life had transformed in ways both challenging and empowering. The traumatic courtroom assault that could have defined him had instead become the catalyst for his emerging activism. The settlement from his lawsuit against the city established the Ward Foundation for Equal Justice, providing legal support to disabled minority youth facing discrimination in the criminal justice system. Though he still used forearm crutches and faced daily physical challenges, Jaylen had found his voice. Schools across Georgia invited him to speak about standing up against injustice. His thoughtful, measured addresses contrasted sharply with the media's initial portrayal of him as a troubled youth. "My disability and my skin color were used as weapons against me," he told a group of students at his former middle school. "But they became my strength when I refused to be silenced. Each of you has that same power, the power to speak truth even when powerful people don't want to hear it." Tamika had undergone her own professional transformation. Initially targeted for her advocacy on behalf of her son, she now served as chairperson of the newly established Atlanta Police Oversight Commission. With subpoena power and investigative authority, the commission reviewed use-of-force incidents, hiring practices, and community complaints. Under her leadership, the commission had already implemented 23 policy changes to reduce racial disparities in policing. "The system doesn't change unless we change it," became her frequent refrain in community meetings. "And we change it by staying engaged, staying vigilant, and refusing to accept injustice as normal." For Darius, the consequences of his actions had been complicated but ultimately affirming. After 3 months of internal review, the CIA had offered him retirement with full benefits rather than termination. The classified nature of his 23 years of service meant his contributions to national security would never be publicly acknowledged, but Director Patricia Lawson had privately commended his moral courage. "You used skills developed to protect American interests abroad, to protect American rights at home," she told him during their final meeting. "That's a complex ethical equation, but one I believe history will judge favorably." With his intelligence background, Darius established King Security Consulting, specializing in civil rights protection and detection of systematic discrimination. His firm provided pro bono services to community organizations, documenting patterns of abuse, and helped municipalities develop equitable enforcement guidelines. Federal legislation introduced in Congress bore Jaylen's name. The Ward Act for Equitable Policing would require body cameras during all interactions with disabled individuals and impose strict penalties for officers who failed to provide appropriate accommodations. Though still working through the legislative process, the bill had bipartisan support and promising prospects for passage. Despite these positive developments, the family continued to face challenges. Death threats arrived periodically from those still loyal to the corrupt system or angered by the changes it had prompted. White supremacist groups had placed the family on watch lists, requiring ongoing security precautions in their daily lives. They had moved to a new home in a different neighborhood, though they refused to leave Atlanta despite offers of relocation assistance. "Running away doesn't solve the problem," Darius explained when questioned about their decision to stay. "It just makes it someone else's problem. This is our community, and we're committed to making it better, not abandoning it." Their most meaningful impact perhaps came through their everyday interactions with neighbors and community members. When the Jackson family moved onto their street and their 14-year-old son Elijah was stopped 3 times in 2 weeks by patrol officers, the King Ward family immediately stepped forward. Darius accompanied Mr. Jackson to the precinct to file formal complaints. Tamika connected them with legal resources. Jaylen befriended Elijah, showing him by example how to document encounters while maintaining his dignity and rights. This personal mentorship multiplied their influence far beyond formal programs or policies. On a warm September evening, the family gathered on their back porch, reflecting on the journey of the past year. "Do you ever regret standing up that day in court?" Tamika asked her son, watching as fireflies began to appear in the gathering dusk. Jaylen considered the question seriously. "No," he said finally. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it changed everything. Not just for us, but for a lot of people who needed things to change." "The work isn't finished," Darius reminded them, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Systems resist change. People who benefited from the old ways will try to rebuild them in new forms. Then we'll keep dismantling them," Jaylen replied with the quiet confidence he had developed through adversity. "Every time they build something unjust, we'll be there to tear it down. And eventually, maybe they'll get tired of building things that don't last." As night fell over Atlanta, a city still reckoning with its painful transformation, the King Ward family represented both a warning to those who would abuse power and a promise to those who suffered under that abuse. The path to justice wasn't straight or simple, but it began with one moment of courage: a disabled black teenager speaking truth in a courtroom, and a father with the skills and determination to ensure that truth would be heard. What would you do if you witnessed injustice happening right in front of you? Would you have the courage to speak up, like Jaylen, even knowing the risks? Comment below with your thoughts on standing up against discrimination. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to support more content exposing racial injustice in America. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the reality that many Black families face in our justice system. Thank you for joining me on this powerful journey through one family's fight for justice, and remember, sometimes the most important change begins with a single voice refusing to be silenced. The story of Jaylen Ward and his father Darius King teaches us powerful truths about justice in America. First, systemic racism thrives in silence and darkness. Exposing it requires both courage and strategy. Jaylen's willingness to speak truth, despite the consequences, became the catalyst for change, while Darius's methodical approach ensured that truth couldn't be buried. Second, injustice rarely exists in isolation. What appeared to be one officer's misconduct revealed an entire corrupt network spanning from local police to federal agencies. Third, privilege and power protect themselves through intimidation, character assassination, and manipulation of supposedly neutral systems like courts and media. Fourth, dismantling unjust systems requires coalition building across communities. The Ward family succeeded because they united disability advocates, racial justice organizations, honest officers, and concerned citizens around a common cause. Fifth, change begins with individual courage, but requires sustained collective action to become permanent. Exposing corruption was just the first step. Building better institutions demanded ongoing vigilance and participation. Finally, we learned that no one is powerless when armed with truth. A disabled Black teenager speaking up in court triggered a transformation that powerful officials couldn't prevent. Justice may not come easily or quickly, but it becomes possible when ordinary people refuse to accept that injustice is normal or inevitable. What would you do if faced with the same injustice as Jaylen? Would you find the courage to speak up, even knowing the risks and potential consequences? Comment below with your thoughts on how you would respond to witnessing discrimination in your community. Have you ever stood up against racism or supported someone who did? Share your experiences to inspire others. If this story moved you, please hit that like button to help more people discover this important message about justice and courage. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories exposing the reality of racial injustice in America and celebrating those brave enough to fight against it. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the challenges many Black families face in our justice system, or with anyone who might need encouragement to speak truth to power. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the King Ward family's fight for justice. Remember, sometimes the most significant change begins with a single voice refusing to be silenced. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and never stop believing that justice is possible.